Hello and welcome to this week's 2 Minute Tuesday. This week, I'm actually not going to be running a countdown because I think it's for sure this is going to take more than 2 minutes. So I apologize for that in advance. The thing is that the tip that I want to share this week is a very important tip, and I don't want to rush through it. So I hope you stick around for this one, because this week we're going to be talking about how do you essentially search for records based on information that is a little bit more complex. Last week we talked about how can you use left outer joins, or using the not in record or the not in filter or operator to be able to find records like accounts that don't have contacts or accounts that don't have any opportunities. But there are some cases where you want to create a little bit of a more complex query, right? Maybe you're trying to find accounts that haven't have any contact created in a few or any opportunity created in a few months, or you want to search for accounts that you haven't had any activity with on the last 3 months or 4 weeks or whatever it is, depending on what your sales cycle is. And of course, you can use this information then to create really target lists that you can reach out to and really focus on. So the example that I'm going to use for this tip is we are going to be leveraging Rollup fields to determine when was the last time we contacted a particular organization. And this same trick can be used for the contact entity, or it can be used for other entities as well. And using Rollup functionality to be able to create your own reports is not something that it only applies to activities, or when was the last time we reach out to someone, or when we interacted with someone. You can use this for other things. And again, along the way, I'll give you some other examples so you have some ideas. But the idea of this week's tip is to talk about how can we leverage Rollup fields, which is such a great functionality in Dynamics 365, to create better views for our users, or for our salespeople or customer service people, or whoever is using Dynamics 365. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a field. And again, just a quick note about what you're going to see, the customizations you're going to see today. I'm not going to be following any best practices or anything like that, any development best practice. I won't be creating a solution or anything like that. This is a trial environment, so I'm just going to add the field straight into the default solution. So again, this is not about development best practices or implementation best practices. This is just about the actual functionality that we're going to be putting in place. So let's go ahead and add the field. So I'm just going to navigate to settings, customizations, just to open the default solution. So once again, we're not going to get really fancy with this. In here, we're going to navigate. We're going to do it with accounts in this example, but again, this works for any entity. If you want to do it with contacts, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It will work for all of them. So I'm going to click on new. And for this particular example, I will be adding, leveraging Rollup fields to determine when was the last time we had any communication or interaction with a particular account record. So if you're more B2C, business to consumer, then you can use this, instead of at the account level or the account record, you can do it at the contact record, but the functionality is essentially the same. So I'm just going to add a name right here to the field. I would say communication. Let's just say that. Now, essentially, the record that the field that we're going to be creating is not just for communication. It also includes tasks, and it also includes custom activities if you want. So if you created a custom activity, so for example, let's say you wanted to track plant visits separately from the other activities, it will track those too. So any activity really that you completed for a particular organization will be tracked with this particular Rollup field. So, think about that on the name. I'm just gonna leave it with last communication, but this could be last interaction, or last time we talked to them, whatever it is. Just pick a name in here. Name doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna leave it there, and then On the data type, we're going to select date and time because again, we're gonna track when was the last time we communicated with them. So I just need to see the date and time. Obviously, you can play with the format and make it date and time if that's really relevant to you. And most of my projects, and because the Rollup fields are calculated every 24 hours, the time doesn't really matter. So I never really show it. But the important part is that we're going to make a Rollup field. So I'm going to go ahead and select Rollup, and I'm going to click on Edit to make sure the field is created. And again, I'm doing this with no edits. I'm just rolling with it. And, if it's too slow, then sorry about that. But we should be good to go here. All right, so my editor for the Rollup field is opening up. Okay, so here we have our Rollup field. So there are a couple of things that we're going to set in here. Obviously, the first thing that we need to select are the related entities, which in our case, because we're creating, again, we're trying to see when was the last time we communicated or had any interaction with this particular organization, we're going to make that the activity entity, right? So we're going to look for activities. Where are you? Oh, there it is. So we pick activities and we click on the checkbox there to make sure it's activities. Now, again, you can use the filters to essentially select the actual records you want to see. So, for example, if this is about, let's say, opportunities that are recent, how many accounts do we have? Sometimes you might have a requirement that says how many account records do we have out there that have recent opportunities open. You can use filters to say that the opportunities have to be created within the last 30 days or something like that. So in this case, I'm just going to pick for the filter. I just want to make sure that the status of the activity is completed. So if we have a phone call that is coming up, but we haven't really had the conversation with them, or at least the phone call hasn't been marked as completed, I don't want to see that as as record that we actually interacted with them. So I want to make sure the activity is completed. Then, the next step is, there's a question here that says, do you want to include indirectly related activities? Now, this one I struggled with at the beginning. I really, it took me a while to figure out exactly what this is. And essentially, as far as I can see, what this is doing is that it doesn't matter if you're connecting the activity to a child record that is related to the account, as long as the account is selected on the to field, or is selected on the from, or is selected on the regarding. So any of those three fields, the system is going to work. It's going to recognize that. What it's not going to recognize is, the official explanation is if you select this and say, yes, I want to, pick activity parties and click on the checkbox, which we're going to do. The official explanation is that this will actually count activities that are connected to child records. So if you had a phone call with a contact that works there, then it should pick that up. But that's not always the case. So if you have a phone call with a contact, for example, but the account is not selected as regarding, then it's not going to work. The Rollup field is not going to show that particular phone call as the last communication you had with that particular company. If the contact is selected as the person who you called and the account is on the regarding field, then it will work. Then the Rollup field will show that interaction as the last interaction that you had. And it also works backwards. So for example, if you add a phone call or an email or an appointment or whatever it is to a case or to an opportunity, obviously the case or the opportunity will be set regarding. But then if the to that you're sending the email to is the account, then it will work too. So it doesn't have to be regarding the account. It has to be somewhere in the actual activity record. So some of the fields has to show that a connection to the account, in this case, somehow. So if you're doing this for the contact record, then obviously the contact has to show up in the regarding field or the to field, or if it's an appointment, it has to be invited somehow. So once again, there has to be a connection. You're just going beyond the regarding field. So that's what I found out. If that's not the case, please let me know in the comments. And then on the aggregation, pretty straightforward. We're going to do a maximum because we want to see the latest date, right, for an activity regarding or related to this particular account. If for some reason the requirement said, I just want to see the oldest one, then you can switch this to minimum, right? If you had, again, a requirement you want to see what was the first time we interacted with this particular account, that could happen. Somebody wants the list of that. then super easy, just switch that to minimum. In our example, we're going to keep it to maximum, and that's the most common requirement. And then for the records, we're going to use actual end as the as the date that we're going to be pulling into our rollup field. So we're going to save that. And by the way, if I go back here, you can see that there's other dates that you can pick from. So, if you want to use due date, for example, I've had requirements a couple of times where they say, look, we don't care if the activity is completed or not. If it's due, like when is the next, due activity? And in that case, you can use due date for that. But again, in most cases will be actual end, because what you want to see is the last time you communicated or interacted with that particular account. So that's the whole point of using maximum there. So we're going to go ahead and save that, and then we're going to hit save and close, and we're going to go ahead and publish the customization. Now, while he's doing that, I'm going to go back to Dynamics, and I want to navigate. Well, it's still publishing, so it's not letting me navigate. I wanted to navigate to the all activities view, just to show you why I picked actual end as the field to essentially roll up, to calculate from there. And the reason for that is that regardless of the type of activity that you're using, the actual end field is sort of populated when you complete it. So whether it's a task or whether it's a phone call or an appointment, whatever it is, they all share that one field in common, which is actual end. And actual end is different than due date, for example. So you could have a due date of July 20th, but the actual end was July 18th because you finish a couple days before the due date, and July 18th will be the day that will be used to show that was the the last interaction or the last communication you had with that particular company. So I'm trying to get this to load because it was publishing all customizations. I should have done that because it takes a little bit longer, but once again, I'm just showing you this in real time. Okay, so let's go to activities right here. And from my activities, I'm going to switch to all activities. You can see I added actual end as a column in there. So if I click on it just to sort it, you can see there's a bunch of, actual end dates on the sample data that came out of Dynamics 365. So, and you can see that there are all different types, right? These are phone calls, these are tasks, and you can find appointments too. If we can find some appointments that will have those, although it looks like mainly tasks and phone calls, but there are some appointments in there, and they will have actual ends as well. So the appointments that are completed will have actual ends. So here's one, for example, introduction call, and it has an actual end. So it works great. So let's go and create an account record just so you can see how it looks, or from the user perspective. So I'm gonna click on new right here. Oh, actually, before we create an account record, let's go ahead and add the field to the form so at least you can see it. Now, typically on implementations, I will leave these out of the form, and that's because I'm mainly creating them for view purposes. I'm trying to create a view of accounts we haven't called in 3 months, or we haven't interacted with in 3 months, or something like that. But in some cases, people really want to see it. They want to see that information all the time. They want to go to the form, open an account, and see when was the last time we interacted with them. So because it's a roll-up field, you cannot really override it or whatever. I typically just add it to the footer of the form because it's a read-only field, and it just makes sense. So I just put it on the footer, and people will be able to access it. So let me go back to the solution here. Let's go to forms. Let's go ahead and add it so at least you see it. And we're gonna filter right here by our custom fields, last communication. I'm just going to drop it right below the name so it's easy. Again, this is not about best practices and user experience tips. This is all about how do we make this work so you guys can start using this on your actual implementations. Again, super useful, easy to do. Now, I will say that we used to do this before with workflow. So every time you close an activity, we had a wait condition that would say, okay, I'm going to wait. And then, whenever an activity was completed, we went and updated a date field or whatnot. The problem with that is you had to have a bunch of workflows because workflows have to be assigned to every activity. So when you completed a phone call and you completed a task, and so you had to have multiple workflows working. So there were a lot of processes just sitting on waiting. And anyway, doing it with rollups works. Now, having said that, rollups don't offer the same amount of flexibility that you have with a workflow. You can get super intricate on when do you want a workflow to fire, whereas with rollup fields, you sort of have some limitations on the filtering that you can use. I found that not every single requirement that I think I can do with a rollup field I have been able to do it. And I have to go back to workflows because, workflows you can do like whatever you want. So, all right, so account name. So let's just use Elevate Solutions here. And I think that's the only field I need. So I'm just going to save that. Okay. And just to refresh so we can get our new field, I'm going to go ahead and refresh the form here. And now we have last communication. Obviously, it hasn't calculated. As you guys probably know, every time you add a rollup field, you will wait 12 hours to calculate across the board, and then it will be every 24 hours after that. So let's go ahead and add an activity in here. And then I'll actually, instead of adding it here because it will be too easy, we can actually add it to a child record just so you guys can see it. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and create, let's just create a case just to make it a little bit harder here. So let's create a case for this particular company. We say that, I don't know, the printer is broken, right? Whatever. In here. So let's go ahead and save the case. And now on the case, so let's say we're talking to this company, we're trying to help them solve their problem about the printer. I go ahead and log an activity. So I add a phone call and say, talk to Gus about their printer problem, right? We'll just type something in there. Doesn't matter what it is. And I'm just going to say it was due today. So, yep, today I called Gus and to talk to him about the printer problem, right? So let's go back to Elevate Solutions. Let's just make sure the activity shows up. You can see right there the phone call shows up. Even though it's connected to the case, is regarding the case, the actual activity shows up at the account level. And then when I do the calculations, force calculation, you can see that the last communication was on 6/19, which is today's date when I'm recording this tip. Now, obviously, I can use that field from Advanced Find and create, whatever type of filter I want. I can say, show me accounts. Actually, let's go ahead and do that really quick just so you can see and you get the full sort of experience here. So I'm going to say I'm searching for accounts. I'm going to narrow it down to active accounts. And I'm going to say where the last communication, right, which is our field, it's older than, and here you get to pick, right, older than 3 months or whatever it is. So again, this will give you the results. Right now we have nothing because only one record has information on there. But obviously over time, this will populate and it will update every day with the rollup fields, but it will give you the results you're looking for, which is what accounts we have in the system where the last communication we have with them is older than 3 months, and then you get the results that you want. So once again, just think about the possibilities of all the records that you can add or all of the situations you can solve with rollup fields. So think about, how can I count, because you can add decimal numbers, for example, or whole numbers and say, count me how many opportunities I have created on the last 3 months, right? So you will add opportunity as the related entity and they created on the last 3 months or something like that. And then it will give you a number. If the number is 0, then you know that those accounts haven't had an opportunity created in 3 months. And again, you can get pretty intricate. You might say, I want to know records that I haven't created an opportunity larger than $50,000 in the last 3 months or something like that. And again, play with the number. So you can then say, if the account records number of large opportunities equals 0, give me the results. And then you get the list of records that you haven't had any opportunities on the last 3 months. So again, play around with the requirements. The idea is to maximize the effectiveness of rollup fields instead of relying on workflows to satisfy some of these requirements. I know it's a super long tip this week. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, any recommendations, any tips for me, let me know on the comments below. Long tip this week, 20 minutes instead of 2-minute Tuesday, but we're still sticking with the T, I guess. So 20-minute Tuesday this week. We'll see you next week.